Yeah. Hi, Vadeesh. Welcome to the Software People Stories.
Hello, Shiv. Good to meet you in the first place. Thank you for this opportunity. I've heard about this series and I'm very curious, how does this conversation go? Thank you.
Okay, good. Actually, I've also been using my curiosity to drive all these conversations. So,
Yeah,
since both of us are curious, let us probably explore together.
yeah,
I
sure.
think a good place to start would be your origin story as to what you did and how you got into IT in general, and then with decades of experience, now how you kind of got into this area of testing.
Right. So I think for those who passed out in early 1990s, there were probably not too many options at that point in time, and software. Um, there were not too many companies in software, but the likes of Infosys and Wipro were making a buzz at that point in time. So it was probably an obvious choice that we got into it. But I think my MTech thesis also helped in that process. After my graduation, after my MTech, I was at NAL. I was under Dr. UN Sinha, um, one of the well-known computer scientists. And he used to run a lab called Flow Solver at NAL. And I was there as an intern. I continued there for some time. And that's when I picked up interest for software. Of course, when some of us were with Dr. Yuan Sinha, it was all about parallel computing. And of course, I didn't get a chance to pursue in that space specifically, but I could get into subsequently, real-time embedded systems, automotive control applications, and telecommunications. Thanks to CG Smith software. They were a small company at that point in time, but were entirely focused on real-time automotive control applications. There were customers like Delco at that point in time. This, in mid 90s that I'm talking about. And then when I moved to Wipro, I had the opportunity to work for several years, over 7 years, in the area of telecommunications. We would call it carrier networks. It was all about time division multiplexing to begin with. And of course, then we moved on to soft switches and whatnot, but it was initially focused on TDM, etc. So I got the opportunity to work on embedded software in that process for several years. And then I was looking for some change, having worked in the embedded software space for several years. And then I got into First Consulting Group. They were not into embedded software. They were only into healthcare IT. They were delivering IT and consulting services to payers, providers, and life sciences companies. But then it also gave me, significant insights as to what it means to work on software-only applications with little or no hardware interaction. While my previous experience was all about embedded software that involved significant, hardware interactions and OS level work, real-time operating system level work. So, and And what was common all through, of course, um, common aspect was process, um, the process of developing software. That was um, I could relate wherever I went. The companies like Nortel Networks, um, in those days, I mean, probably 30 years ago, they already at that time they supported distributed software development, and could engage with multiple companies across the globe as vendors, and they could get software developed by teams across the globe, and that was all because of significant processes and systems that they had in place. I still remember very well about their software configuration management tool. Even the most advanced ones, the next generational configuration management tools today probably can't compete with some of the features that they have had in their proprietary systems and tools. What was common was process. What was common was, things like skills and capability development, and so to say, testing. And that is probably one of the reasons why we chose testing to be the area of focus when we started on our own about 5 years ago with some of my co-founders, when we started with the journey of AlgoShack. Having worked with so many software companies in the embedded software space, in the telecommunications space, in the automotive control application space, and then subsequently in the healthcare space. One of the key challenge was, and it continues to be, is to develop quality software in time and continuously on an ongoing basis to establish that edge over competition. And that problem exists even today. I mean, and that's what we are trying to solve with AlgoShack. We're trying to disrupt at least one portion of it, the testing portion of it, to make testing faster by automating test automation. So that's probably to sum it up. Let me also quickly add, we also have seen how companies struggled and how companies perished, for not being able to change quickly and adopt to changing market requirements. For example, Nortel Networks. It was a giant at one point in time, but lost out to those soft switch vendors that started in small garages. Nortel did make an attempt to change, but their changes were incremental, and there was no fundamental change that they attempted because they were too wedded to the installed base that they had world over. So some of this, helped also, position our initiative when we started on our own. Today, what we wanted is, don't go by the rule book, don't go by the way automation is done in the industry. Change it upside down and make it better, make it a lot faster without compromising on quality. So if that helps give you a feel for why we do what we do today based on what we experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. And with such a wide and varied background, there are multiple curiosity questions that come to my mind. Before that, since you mentioned configuration management, and since you've also been in embedded hardware side and also the software side,
Yeah.
one of my very first experiences of teaching configuration management to a team of engineers in one of the defense organizations.
Okay.
So after the first 15 minutes, I could see very bored faces.
Yeah.
Then I was seriously wondering, why, what's wrong, or no, what is it that I'm missing?
Yep.
Then one of them said that, why are you teaching us all these things? Because, in software, configuration management is a major nightmare area.
Absolutely.
Whereas in hardware, they are so disciplined. Every little change for every board, every circuit. So they said, no, this is something that we must do, we have to, and we have been doing.
Yes.
So why are you saying why configuration management, importance of configuration management and all that? So then we said, okay, I don't need to tell you about all those things. Let us now get into maybe some of the major differences between hardware configuration and software configuration management, etc. And then it became a more interactive session.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
configuration management and hardware, that brought me that memory.
Absolutely. I mean, even today, one of the key challenges for companies to deploy seamless DevOps processes. One of the key challenges is the tools that they use for software configuration management. Of course, there are, the technology that they use, programming languages that they use add to it. But if you will not be able to, automate a build process. If you're not able to automate build process, then the whole DevOps chain breaks. And people who didn't think about it, it's a transformational change when they have to go for it. And I've seen this in the medical devices industry.
Oh, okay.
See, medical devices at one point in time, they thought they were hardware centric. They realized of late that they're also technology companies. They have significant software running in each of those hardware devices. And of course, for positioning those companies as software companies, they also have valuation angle, in their mind when they do that. But that said, there is significant software, and the software needs to be distributed to devices that are deployed globally. Even if you consider a hospital chain, today hospitals are distributed globally. Even if you consider a hospital, it'll have its bases across the globe. Now you need to deploy software to all these devices, not only for scheduled maintenance, but also for preventive maintenance.
Yeah.
If a CT machine goes down, it's a revenue loss, but it's a huge clinical risk at a hospital. So you have to distribute patches and upgrades seamlessly from a central location. And this calls for seamless DevOps processes and calls for, in the first place, proper software configuration management tools and processes. Processes and tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not only your software configuration, but also the deployment environment configurations.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, because the drivers may not be compatible, and suddenly,
Absolutely, and that is the. You have to have Dockerization done so that your upgrades are seamless. Otherwise, with each environment, you will run into trouble, right? Because you won't know what those environments have. So all this has its root in software configuration management processes and tools, in my view. So I mean, we struggle even today. Um, when we generate scripts, it solves only half the problem.
Mm-hmm.
When you are able to execute scripts without manual intervention,
Okay.
it better be touchless, because when it involves somebody to trigger, then it depends on that individual when to trigger, what to trigger. If it is made touchless, then you actually realize the benefits of automation. If it is to be triggered manually, then the benefits of automation is not realized, and this calls for storing scripts in appropriate place, and triggering execution. So we'll be talking about configuration management tools, of course, specifically in this case test management, test data management, and test cloud management, and so on. But again, we would be discussing configuration management at the core of it.
Oh, wonderful.
So I mean, I share the same passion, Shiv.
Yeah. So a couple of other things that you mentioned. One, across the different domains that you worked in. Like for instance, when you said whether it is automotive, embedded, or healthcare, and so on, you found some common threads in terms of processes, practices, discipline, and so on.
Yes.
The two questions related to that. One is how important is it for someone to understand the domain at least? And part two of that is how difficult is it? Because coming from another domain with some, let's say, the transferable skills, as an individual, have you faced this, what we call the imposter syndrome? Or how have you been able to overcome that? Because one of the examples that you yourself mentioned was the deployment environment in these hospitals. Right? So you need to understand how that business works and what happens so that your techniques can be applied in that context, even though you may not be a domain expert in that.
Right.
So how have you been able to jump across all these different domains and contexts?
Yeah, I think domain is very critical element in all this. If we don't understand the domain that we work on, we will not be able to relate much to the domain users, and products have to be user centric. Products and solutions and services, whatever that it is, I think it got to be user centric. So I'll start with the probably healthcare, and then I'll move on to other domains. I had the opportunity to work for this company called First Consulting Group that got subsequently merged with CSC, which is now DXC Technology. And FCG, before it got acquired, it was FCG had spent about 26, 27 years in the industry as a US corporation. And if I'm right, FCG was incorporated sometime around 1980. And they were the first to coin this term called computer on wheels. FCG was into consulting business, focused on hospitals and health insurance companies and life sciences companies, initially in the US, and then they spread across to Europe as well. So people would literally go to hospitals, and they would carry the computer as the doctor moved from one ward to another. And on behalf of the doctor, these consultants would enter data into the computer because doctors were they were not interested.
Okay.
They thought computer would come in the way of their their treatment. It would take their focus away from the patient. If they are with the patient for 10 minutes, they want to spend all the 10 minutes with the patient and not with the computer. So people had to prove that computer would help you maximize your attention to the patient, and that you could attend to more and more patients. So the point here is that if you don't address the needs of the domain users, then you will not get anywhere. And this was an acute problem in the healthcare industry, and it continues to be a challenge. And that is the reason why subsequently, whenever we built a team, the teams would always have doctors, nurses, radiologists. Some 10-15 years ago, you would not find many radiologists in a city. Even then, we would have on our teams radiologists. If we were working on a CT machine or an MR machine, or if we were working with anything that was related to radiology, radiology information systems, then we would have radiologists in the team, because otherwise customer wouldn't listen to us. They wouldn't even respect us. So in my mind, domain is core. I mean, I think that comes first. You may call it business processes or whatsoever, and then comes the software products, applications, and if we don't empathize with the domain user, if you don't try to understand his viewpoint, I think will not be able to cater to his or her needs. This was applicable when I worked in the telecom domain, and when I worked in the other embedded software areas. For example, Wipro would spend so much time in training people, not as much in terms of classroom training, but on the job training, in teaching people, session initiation protocol, etc. So core to, I'm talking about, late 1990s and early 2000. So core to the telecom domain. If you're into switching, broadband networks is another thing, and then wireless is the third. In those days, that's how telecom was divided into in terms of business. But if you're into switching, if you don't understand how a class 5 switch works, what's a real-time operating system is about, and what's a protocol, like you have HL7 protocol in healthcare industry, you have SS7 protocols in the telecom industry. So unless you understand these, and there were other protocols like ISUP and BTUP and from the traditional TDM space. So people would spend so much time learning these, doing some hands-on, exercises, getting a grip of it, and people in the telecom division would know about telecom to a decent extent to have a good conversation with the likes of Cisco and Avaya and Nortel. I'm talking about those days. And subsequently I had the opportunity to work with AT&T when it comes to ISPs, service providers, telecom service providers. So I think domain is very important. Yeah, you may not be able to master it. You can never be a doctor. That opportunity is lost already. But I think how best we can collaborate with people who have significant domain knowledge and act as bridge, with the domain users. I think that's something common that I have experienced.
Yeah, so the part 2 was, what is the Vadeesh magic formula that helped you accelerate or shorten the time needed to learn this new domain and be effective?
I'm not sure there was any magic. I think each took time. I still remember when I moved from the automotive control application space, wherein we would actually review code written in assembly languages and write code in assembly languages. From there, when I moved to Wipro to work in the telecom division, switching division, and that at that point in time we were working for Nortel. There was an ODC, and we had to learn this language called Protel.
Okay.
It was Nortel's proprietary language. It had the characteristics of C and C++, but it was very different. And whatever we followed in C or C++, not so much of C++ in those days, you had to reverse it to get to Protel and to so it was made so complex that even if somebody hacks the code, wouldn't follow what was being written, what was it intended to do. That kind of precaution was taken by companies like Nortel. They developed a programming language for that purpose. So that was a barrier. And then we had to learn a number of protocols and how a class 5 switch handled it. That was not easy. I think it would have taken easily a couple of years before I could be comfortable in that space. I think it calls for that kind of investment. And then I thought, when I moved to healthcare, it would be very easy, because it is all about more open domain than telecom, that needed real-time operating systems, so many protocols and country-specific requirements and whatnot. And then there was this transition from TDM to soft switching, etc. But after going there, I realized the enormity of and the new challenges that you have to understand the psychology of doctors, work with doctors. So I think it always needed significant amount of investment, and one has to have patience, I think, and prioritize it. That domain is important. And some of these companies helped build that culture of learning, focus on learning. And I mean, I still feel, even today, I am a Wiproid. I mean, in that sense. I feel that I graduated from Wipro. I learned a lot when I was there. And similar feeling for my stint at FCG and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very nice. Since you mentioned patience,
Yeah.
I wanted to segue into slightly, probably the next larger theme of AlgoShack,
Yeah.
of being an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Generally, we find that entrepreneurs are impatient. Now, impatient in that they want to bring a change, they want to create an impact, they are not satisfied with things being the same. Right?
Yeah.
So, how
Yeah.
was that transition for you from being patient or having to be patient to probably what one may also call as the startup bug that bit you?
Yeah, I think I would say that one has to have patience if one wants to pursue um, something like a startup, because there is no instant gratification. There is nothing that happens overnight. Uh, I mean, I'll give some very simple examples. Simplest of examples, maybe very tactical.
Mhm.
If you have not completed 3 years, and if you don't have um, financials for 3 years, no bank would accept your application for loan. I mean, it is as simple as that.
Yeah.
So you can only create some history, and that is very much required for building credibility. Then you need to have that patience.
Okay.
Uh, I mean, let me back up a bit. So we wanted to do something different. We wanted to create some more impact than what we could create in the corporate world. That was one of the reasons why we quit. We have spent some 28. This is not just about me. A couple of co-founders who joined me. We have done enough in the corporate world. There are things work in the corporate world, not that things don't work, but it has its own pros and cons. And so is the case with a startup as well. So, but then we said, let's try something different and let's see if we can contribute back to the society in that process. Here, certainly we hire as part of the leadership team in large companies, we hire, but we hire on somebody else's behalf, right? Yeah. Can we create some employment on our own?
Okay.
Can we contribute back to the software industry by bringing about some change? So that is how we started. And then there were options, right? I mean, do you want to build something around services? Do you want to build something around product? Then we said no to services because it's too late for us to do something in the services space. We will not be able to create much impact, and no one will see any differentiation. So to differentiate ourselves, we said product. And the minute we said we would do something, we would build a product, then that called for patience, because if it is services, probably you could start earning revenue in 3 months, in 6 months. But in the product world, it is not at all possible. You have to allow enough time for MVP to be built, minimum viable product to be built. You have to allow enough time for early adopters to try. And then in the meanwhile, you have to go on investing. So investment comes first here. I mean, you can't make just in time investment. You will have to make significant investment, and it is relatively capital intense. Though there is no hardware involved, but so you have to wait for returns. You may break even after 4 years. You may break even after 5 years. So you have to have patience. you will build something very primitive, because you have to see your idea working. You have to get some um, validation from people. But then you should know that it is your very early initial version that has to go through several changes before it really gets some kind of acceptance. I mean, unless you have that patience, while I think one has to be aggressive in the sense one has to have courage. This is more like jumping from a cliff, in my view. So to that extent, there is a lot of risk. It is, I mean, if one is looking for safer option, then possibly this is not an option at all. I mean, you could try to make it a little safer here and there, but so one has to be aggressive, courageous. One has to have passion. One must pursue it relentlessly, and that restlessness, I think, is there. Will always be there. But I mean, that is within. And when I deal with my teams, I have to deal with them as people.
That is my follow-on question.
I can't really deal with them, push them. I have to have them continue with us. Not only for 3 months, 6 months. They have to continue with us. If the journey has to be enriching and satisfying and gratifying, if we don't have people with us, those who started with us, and then we will not be able to even celebrate. I mean, because no one would even know what that accomplishment means. So I think it is about balancing, and I don't know if there is any clearer answer. This is what I could think of.
Okay. Yeah, I remember, I think, a quote attributed to Richard Branson, where he says, starting up is like jumping off the cliff, like you mentioned. And he adds that you jump off the cliff and then you start building the plane.
Yes.
So while doing this, what are some of the practices that helped you in you staying enthusiastic and also keeping the team also motivated and staying together?
One thing is, I think we always looked for some milestones, some goals to celebrate. We did that. We celebrated when we demoed it to the first customer. We celebrated when the UI stood up.
Okay.
We celebrated when we created the ID card. I mean, first time when we issued ID cards. I mean, badges, the lanyard. And we celebrated when the logo was designed and everyone agreed and launched. We celebrated when our first website was launched. So I think every milestone we celebrated. Every small little milestone we celebrated, and that was helping us all realize, we are traveling. I mean, we have covered some distance. Of course, we have a long way to go, but that's one. And second, we tried to. I mean, we didn't look for any grandeur plans, right? I mean, we are bootstrapped today, and I won't say it is by design, but we believe that by bootstrapping, I'm forced to be profitable. It forces certain behavior that is healthy. In the first place. So we didn't, I mean, there is skin in the game. It's our money. So we work for it. We work for that money to grow. So I think remaining bootstrapped, not having realistic plans, and being able to achieve it also has helped. And the founding team, we know that we have put money and we have not invested that money in a mutual fund. So I can't just watch it grow.
True.
I have to spend time and energy to grow it. So I think there is a common understanding that we have to work for it and grow it to reap the benefits. And don't be too greedy. Don't look for short-term gains. Feed the team first. Leadership eats last. And some of these very basic and probably old school of thought also has helped travel whatever distance, 5 years plus, that we have traveled. We have been able to stay together. I mean, some of our employees, the core team that joined us, this is beyond the founding team. People have, the company has finished 5 years. There are people who have finished 5 years.
Wow.
And
congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. And what makes us proud is that some of those people joined us from campus without any significant prior experience. And today they are all impacting significant portion of the company. Somebody is driving SaaSification in its entirety. It's not just about developing software, but UI, UX, making sure that there is zero downtime and upgrades are seamless and there is cadence. Not small. I think software engineering is not very easy.
Yeah.
So there are people with 5 years of experience managing significant portion of the company, and we also have instituted ESOP to give some idea, so that people have they think it is their company. It's not someone else's. And we are also talking about how we can contribute in our own small little way to remove biases in the society. Automation otherwise is a highly skilled job. Now what we are trying to do is democratize automation. Anyone can automate testing. People with no experience can automate testing. People with 30 years experience can also automate testing. Both can bring the same degree of enthusiasm, and the experience bit is taken care by the platform. So, I mean, this is actually helping people in the ecosystem participate in innovating and making automation, a real thing, So you can realize the true benefits of automation. Scripts written only when adopted, only when used, only when they run routinely is when actually the benefits are realized. So we are able to invite participation from across roles in the ecosystem. That's I know we can't impact the society at large, but in our own small little way, at least wherever we go, if we are able to do this, if we are able to create more inclusive environment, I believe it helps.
Yeah, that's very nice. I particularly like when you say that anybody can automate and anybody can test.
Yeah.
Yeah, truly. But then the landscape that you're working in, this is probably as an outsider layman's kind of perspective, where today these solutions that are deployed are getting more and more complex.
Yes.
It's not that it is a simple one program that is written, etc.
Correct.
So working more in the ecosystem testing space, and also with a sudden leap in technologies, particularly the AI technologies. You also say that you're embedded AI. And I liked it when you mentioned that it is actually the expertise and experience that you actually put in your solution, and others is, can generate the actual test scripts and all that.
Yeah.
Where do you see this going from two perspectives? Now, one, today, a lot of stories, or at least anecdotal things that people talk about, saying, I asked ChatGPT for an algorithm, it gave me one, and that it ran. And I said, write code, it gave me code. Then I said, give me test for that, it gave me test for that.
Yeah.
So in that kind of a context, since every company or every product identifies some USP and they would like to build on some of their own experience, the role of probably the domain awareness and how they are specifically solving the problem, and then training the platform to address that. So what are your thoughts on that? And then are you seeing that as a challenge or as an opportunity?
I think we see that as an opportunity. So let me give a perspective. Testing is a is a growing market. It has been there, and it continues to grow year on year. Even today, about 60% of testing is done manually.
Okay.
And that is the opportunity. And testing technology companies, companies like AlgoShack, there are not many. There are very few, world over. And these companies all have, they all started probably about 10, 15 years ago, max.
Okay.
Many of them more recent than that. Each one has taken on, their path. Those that started 15 years ago, they started with record and play technology. There was no AI at that point in time. And they may have brought in, AI, etc. of late. And the solutions in such scenarios could be disjoint and not so seamless. And then many of these companies have tried to introduce their proprietary framework, their proprietary scripting language. And scripts will not be delivered as end deliverable. Rather, you have to use the product to continue to run the scripts. And many a times they also specify where to execute those scripts. They would have their own cloud execution environments. Now, what we have done is, and we believe we are highly differentiated in this aspect. What we have done is, we are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are not bringing in any proprietary language or any proprietary scripting language.
Okay.
We use the same, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, C#, Python, and any of the testing tools that are readily available in the market, the likes of, Selenium, Playwright, Cypress, Protractor, Sikuli, Coded UI, Fly UI, WinApp and these are all open source. But not only we support open source, we also support the likes of Test Complete, LeanFT, Squish, that are commercial. So what we do is, we only accelerate automation. If
Okay.
you used earlier Java Selenium for your automation, if you employed people to automate testing in Java Selenium, now you would use AlgoQA, and AlgoQA would produce scripts
Okay.
in Java Selenium only. So you don't have to change anything. Your the solution, the product AlgoQA, it fits seamlessly um, in a federated environment that you have.
Okay.
No rip and replacement whatsoever is required.
Okay.
So in this process, we are not introducing any new technology. So those industries that are highly regulated, they would have made their technology choices already. So we come in, not change their technology landscape, but only accelerate automation. So that is how we position ourselves, and that is our differentiator, key differentiator. There is no monopolizing whatsoever.
Okay.
Truly democratize automation, and you could execute these scripts anywhere. You won't require AlgoQA, which is our product, once you have the scripts. I mean, if you continue to use AlgoQA, there are advantages in maintenance, but if you think you want to maintain it on your own, then that is very much possible. So in this sense as well, we are democratizing it. We are keeping it very open and not closed. So that is when we believe there will be greater participation. Now, coming to AI, we are using AI and machine learning where it matters. At the end of the day, testing is about verification and validation. Testing is not really about following 10 steps for completing a process, for completing a workflow. There is significant validation required at every step of the way. Therefore, even when we generate test cases, they have to be validated.
Okay.
So this is our fundamental belief. So you cannot turn a blind eye. You cannot leave it entirely to machine learning to automate testing, because then you don't know what you're testing.
Yeah.
And whether it meets the testing requirements, be it verification, be it validation. So we say that machine learning wherever it matters. For example, to remove duplication, in test suite, to order test cases for smarter execution.
Okay.
And to forecast against each test case as to what could potentially fail when I execute next. So that you can pick the test cases for a regression suite more scientifically than going by gut.
So it's more like the risk-based testing approaches.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Risk-based testing is where we use machine learning use cases. In a controlled manner, for automated test generation, we use machine learning. I'll give some examples. For example, if you go to digital commerce, all the consumer-facing portals or apps, that help you sell or buy. There is some commonality, right? So you can learn and you can bootstrap your test design efforts. Likewise, in the EMR, EHR world, electronic health record world, there is a standard called OpenEHR. Now, if EHRs are built using OpenEHR, then you could expect some standardization.
Yeah.
I mean, there is something you could learn. So you have to apply it in a controlled manner. And at the end of the day, each application is unique. Even though, even when you talk about Mintras and Flipkarts and Amazons of the world, I believe the quality of the application depends on the people who developed it, their practices, their habits, the processes that they followed. So, machine learning has to be specific to that application. It cannot be completely, generalized. The kind of issues that you would have in one application, you will not meet with same issues in another application, because the teams that develop those applications are different. Their culture would vary. The environment in which they developed could vary. So, and I don't know so much about ChatGPT, but let me add one bit. So what is happening with ChatGPT? If the information is available somewhere, then it can help organize. Probably it helps students. Earlier if I ran 4 queries, now 1 query is good enough. I can get some poems written, I can get essays written. I can get some tips for writing Java Selenium scripts. But somebody has to probably leverage it and do a lot more on top of it to productize it for a particular use case. I mean, that's without knowing a lot about it. Let me hasten to add that. And we are doing some work checking how these could pan out, but I still would go back. Each domain is different. Though AlgoQA is a generic test automation platform, when I am talking to third-party logistics customers, then the language is different. When I talk to digital commerce, the language is different. We tell them how it could help improve conversion. I mean, their biggest challenge is conversion, right? I mean, conversion, if it is 2%, then that's great. And to get it to 2%, they have to spend a lot in terms of marketing. Now, instead, if you have a solid portal, you can, help reduce bounce off ratio. So, I mean, that's the language we should be talking when we are in front of, CDOs of digital commerce industry. I mean, otherwise, doesn't make sense to sell automation for automation. And the same thing goes, if I'm in front of a medical devices customer. The challenges are different, pain points are different.
Wonderful.
And that is very important in my view than a very generic solution. I think that needs to be trained to solve a specific problem. Need to be worked upon in my view.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, goes back to the point on understanding domain that we spoke of earlier.
Yes.
One thing, I didn't realize that in a conversation we are almost running out of time. But I still have one question that I would like to ask you. Now, first, it's very reassuring to know that what they call as the human in the middle is still valid. It can't be everything AI and everything automated. And with that in mind, do you have any quick tips for people who are considering a career in testing? Okay, whether it is someone new entering the industry, or sometimes people who've done some work, those who go through probably the midlife crisis, saying that now should I learn something new and then should I contribute in that area? What would be your tips for getting into testing?
Yeah, I think testing today is no longer that isolated, activity that begins after development, like the way it used to be at one point in time with waterfall models. I think um, testing is more holistic. It is not just about process. It is about uh, domain. It's about functionality. It is also about technology. I think test engineers got to be techno-functional in the first place. They need to know tools. They need to know techniques. They need to understand um, about automation. They should be able to automate. They should be able to automate not only functional testing but non-functional testing. They should be able to um, unit test code. They should be able to perform scalability testing. They should be able to test if ETL migration, whether it has been successful or not. So one needs to know, for example, um, writing queries using SQL or whatever. That is on one side. So what we call today software development engineers in test. So I said they got to be techno-functional. So QAs should develop as BAs as well, be able to understand, product owners' perspectives, must be able to relate very well to the business requirements. So QA, BA, SDET, and continue to focus on learning techniques. I mean, for example, people end up writing end-to-end test cases because they think it is important. Now, what happens is when you write end-to-end test cases, there will be too many test cases, and there will be too many steps. Instead, if you write test cases at each component level, and for end-to-end testing, if you string the test cases at the component level without having to rewrite them, there will be significant reuse, and that reuse helps with automation. So there is no point in automating something that is not optimal. It is best to optimize test cases, whom test cases, redesign test cases, write test cases keeping users in mind, so that testing efforts, automation efforts, test execution efforts, they all go down. I think constant learning. I mean, one cannot say that I'm a test engineer, I'm at the low end of this food chain. I mean, this is a feeling that test engineers carry. Probably that is one of the reasons why there hasn't been much innovation in the past in the testing space, because we didn't consider it important. Be it the leadership, be it the development teams, be it the people that pursue testing. I think there has to be much higher self-esteem. We have to place it correctly and give it right importance and learn. I think then testing is for those who are very curious, and one can explore the entire solution rather than focusing on developing one bit of it. I think there is huge opportunity for testing fraternity to learn more and more about the products and solutions and customers. So one has to see it that way, in my view. And it's really for curious people.
Right. Yeah, that is a really nice way to kind of conclude this conversation. We started with the curiosity. You said you were curious. I said I was curious. And then that seems to have emerged as a key requirement to be a successful tester and make positive contributions.
I think so, Shiv. I mean, I think it is curiosity that's a key ingredient for a tester or a test engineer.
Yeah. On that note, thanks a lot, Vadeesh, for taking the time and sharing your experience and also some of these things which appear simple, but then how important they are in order to ensure that there is good software that goes out finally.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That's what matters. Software is the differentiator today everywhere. Thank you so much, Shiv, for giving this opportunity. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I'm stopping the